She heard the gunshot before she saw the man. It cracked through the Seoul night like something tearing at the seam, sharp and final, and Serena Calloway froze on the rain-slicked pavement outside the Harper Foundation gala, one hand still resting on the cab door she had just stepped through. People screamed somewhere to her left. Glass shattered. A woman in a red dress stumbled backward into a flower arrangement and took it down with her. And then came the sound that would live in Serena's memory long after everything else faded. Footsteps, fast and deliberate, cutting through the chaos like they owned it. And then a body slammed into hers with a force that lifted her clean off the ground. Her back hit the marble pillar of the entrance archway. Every molecule of air left her lungs at once. Her clutch skidded across the whetstone and spun into the dark. And the man who had crashed into her was now pressed against her, one forearm braced against the pillar above her head, his entire body curved around hers like a wall, like a decision. She could feel the controlled tension in him, not panic, not accident. This was deliberate. He had aimed for her on purpose, and not to hurt her. She looked up. He was tall. Dark hair, rain-damp, pushed back from a face that had no business being that sharp and that still at the same time. A jaw that could cut glass. Eyes the color of deep water at night, scanning the street over her shoulder with the calm precision of a man doing arithmetic, not panicking. She noticed his breathing. Slow. Measured. Like he had trained himself out of the fear response entirely, and all that was left was calculation. Then she noticed the shoulder of his shirt. Dark. Wet. Spreading. He was bleeding, and he had still used his body to shield hers without a second of hesitation. "Don't move," he said. His voice was low and quiet in the particular way that rooms go quiet when someone important walks in. Serena, who had spent the last 3 years carefully rebuilding every instinct she had ever let go soft, chose this exact moment to ignore every single one of them. "You're bleeding," she said. He looked down at her then. Directly. Like she had said something in a language he did not expect her to speak. Something moved at the edge of his expression, a flicker, contained immediately, replaced by that same careful wall. "I said don't move," he repeated. 3 black vehicles rolled silently to the curb. Men in dark suits materialized from somewhere, moving with the quiet efficiency of people who had rehearsed this. One of them reached the pillar in seconds flat and spoke rapidly in Korean, eyes everywhere. The man above Serena straightened fractionally. His arm came down from the pillar. The danger, whatever shape it had taken, was retreating. He stepped back from her. His eyes moved over her once, not the way men usually looked at her, not the slow appreciative scan she had learned to anticipate and deflect. This was different. This was the look of someone running a diagnostic, checking for damage. When he was satisfied she was whole, he bent without a word, picked her clutch up from the whetstone, and held it out. Serena took it. She was surprised to find her hands were steady. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. A single, clean acknowledgement. Then he turned to leave, his men already shifting to receive him. "You still need that looked at," she called after him. He stopped walking. Did not turn around. Just paused for one breath, long enough for her to wonder if she had imagined the hesitation, and then he kept moving. His men closed around him like water around a stone, and within 30 seconds, he was inside the lead vehicle and the convoy was pulling away silently into the Seoul night, and the street was left with nothing but rain and broken glass, and the fading memory of him. Serena stood at the entrance to a gala she no longer cared about attending, her gown soaked through, his blood on the sleeve of her dress, and something entirely unwelcome knocking around in her chest. She had spent 3 years making sure she did not feel things like this. She told herself it was the adrenaline. She went inside. Welcome to DOM Romance Besties. If you are new here, I am going to need you to do 3 things right now. Like this video. Hit subscribe. And drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from, because this community is everywhere and I love knowing. Share this one with your most dramatic friend, your most romantic friend, or honestly just the one who needs something good today. Because this one is going to do something to you. Now let us get into it properly. Serena Calloway was 28 years old, and she had what her best friend Diane called a gift for walking into rooms and being the most beautiful person in them while somehow also being the most overlooked. It was not false modesty. It was a choice. Serena had learned the hard way 3 years ago, in a humiliation she had never fully described to anyone, that being seen too clearly by the wrong person cost more than she was willing to pay again. So she had built herself a life with very precise edges. A good job as a senior events coordinator for the Harper Foundation, an apartment she was genuinely proud of, a circle of friends she trusted, and a locked door inside herself that she had not let anyone near since the night Marcus Webb told his entire family's social circle that she had misunderstood what they were and then married someone else before the month was out. She did not think about Marcus very often anymore. That was not the same as being over it. She knew that. She just refused to let knowing it be a problem. She thought about the bleeding man in the rain exactly once on the drive home from the gala. Then she put him away in the same place she put other things she could not afford to think about and went to sleep. She saw him again 4 days later. The Harper Foundation's annual charity auction was being held at the Latte World Tower, and Serena had been running logistics for it since 6 that morning. By the time the guests started arriving, she had already handled a missing centerpiece delivery, a catering substitution that had required 15 minutes of calm negotiation, and one board member who had decided at the last possible moment that his table assignment was an act of personal disrespect. She was standing near the entrance with her tablet, wearing a deep green dress that Diane had insisted on and she had almost changed out of twice, checking off arrivals and trying to remember if she had eaten anything since the breakfast she had half finished at 7. When she heard the room change. That was the only way to describe it. The ambient noise did not get louder or quieter. It just shifted, the way a crowd shifts when something moves through it that does not quite belong to the ordinary world. Serena looked up from her tablet. He walked in like he had already decided the room was his and was simply allowing everyone else to remain in it out of courtesy. Dark suit, no tie, that same controlled stillness she remembered from the rain. No visible entourage this time, though she noticed, because she was good at noticing things, that the 3 men who entered behind him at a distance were not guests in any meaningful sense. His shoulder was fine. Whatever she had seen bleeding 4 nights ago had been managed, stitched up, put away with the same neatness he seemed to apply to everything. He stopped in the middle of the entrance and looked around the room once. His eyes found hers. Serena did not look away fast enough. She had been watching him too directly, and they both knew it, and there was nowhere to go with that except through it. She held his gaze for a count of 3, gave him a single professional nod of acknowledgement, and went back to her tablet. Her heart was doing something she was actively choosing not to discuss with herself. She spent the next 40 minutes being very busy and very professional and extremely not thinking about where he was in the room. She was helping one of the waitstaff navigate a tray crisis near the east corridor when a voice came from just behind her left shoulder. "You didn't go to the hospital." She turned around. He was closer than expected. Not inappropriately close, but close in the way that made the space between them feel like a conversation neither of them had started officially yet. "I didn't need to," Serena said. "I wasn't the one who was shot." Something happened at the corner of his mouth. It was not quite a smile. It was the ghost of one. "Grazed," he said. That is a word people use when they do not want to say shot. He looked at her for a moment. That same diagnostic attention. "You're the coordinator." "Serena Calloway." "Yes." "Kane Ryu." She knew the name. She did not know she knew it until he said it, and then it surfaced from somewhere in the background noise of the world she moved through. Boardrooms, charity circuits, foundation donors. Kane Ryu. Son of the late David Ryu, who had built the Ryu Group from a small import business into something that occupied 17 floors of one of the most expensive buildings in the city. Kane had been raised partly in the States, educated there, and returned to Seoul 8 years ago to take over what his father left behind. That was the version that appeared in financial newspapers. The other version, the one that moved in whispers at the edges of the rooms Serena worked in, described a man who had inherited not just his father's legitimate empire, but everything underneath it. The Ryu name was the kind of name that ended conversations when it came up in certain contexts. The kind of name people lowered their voices around. She looked at him and she thought, I know exactly what you are. She thought, I should walk in the other direction. She thought, you have blood on your shoulder and you still caught me before I hit the floor. It is a good event, he said. You do good work. Thank you, she said, and meant it without flinching, and then her name came through her earpiece and she had to go, and she went, and she was professionally fine about the whole thing for approximately the next hour. Then she walked past a cluster of guests near the auction display and heard a man's voice she did not recognize saying something low and amused in Korean, and she heard Kane's response. And she did not speak Korean, but she did not need to because she could read a room, and she could read what the other man was looking at and what he was commenting on, and it was her. She kept walking. She did not look at Kane. She had no reason to look at Kane. They had exchanged approximately 40 words. What she felt was not his to manage. Except that when she was refilling her water glass at the bar 20 minutes later, the man from the cluster appeared beside her, all easy charm and expensive cologne, and introduced himself as Leo Shin, an associate of the Ryu group, and smiled in the particular way that told her he thought this was going to go somewhere. You have been running circles around this whole room, he said, leaning one elbow on the bar, angled toward her in a way that said he had practiced this. How do you find the time to also be the most interesting thing in it? Serena looked at him pleasantly. That is very kind. Can I get you something from the bar? Leo Shin laughed. I love that. She puts you back in your place and makes you feel good about it. That is rare. I am working, Serena said, not unkindly. After working then. She opened her mouth to decline with the same warm efficiency she used for all of this, and then she felt it. A shift in the air pressure to her left. The particular quality of stillness that she was already, after 2 encounters, beginning to recognize as his. Kane was at the bar. He had not been there 30 seconds ago. He ordered something in Korean from the bartender without looking at Leo. Leo's easy posture shifted almost imperceptibly, the way posture shifts when the most dangerous person in a room walks into your peripheral vision, and your body knows it before your brain does. Kane glanced at Serena. Just once. Brief and entirely neutral. Miss Calloway, he said. I believe the foundation director was looking for you near the stage. She knew for a fact the foundation director was not looking for her near the stage. She had just spoken to him 12 minutes ago and everything was fine. She also understood exactly what was happening. The very reasonable thing to do was to call it out. To say smoothly that she was perfectly capable of handling this herself, to give Leo a polite no on her own terms, and to not allow Kane Ryu to install himself as any kind of gatekeeper of her evening. She did the reasonable thing. I should go check on that, she said to Leo. Enjoy the event. Leo, with one eye still on Kane, decided gracefully that his interest in the conversation had run its natural course. Serena walked toward the stage. Kane walked with her for exactly 4 steps, which was far enough from Leo that the courtesy of it dissolved, and she stopped and turned. The director is not looking for me, she said. No, Kane agreed. I had that handled. I know you did. Then why? Because he was not going to stop at 1 no, Kane said, and you were going to have to give him 3 more before he accepted it, and you should not have to work that hard at an event you are running. He paused. That is the only reason. Serena looked at him. Really looked at him. At the careful steadiness of his face and the thing just underneath it that was not nearly as steady, the thing he was keeping behind glass with visible effort. That is a very reasonable explanation, she said slowly. It is the true one. Okay, she said. Then, because she was constitutionally unable to let things rest when they deserved examination, you were angry. Something moved in his jaw. I don't get angry. Kane, she said, and it was the first time she had used his name, and something in him went very still at the sound of it. You walked to that bar like you were going to remove it from the building. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Then he said, he was bothering you. I see, said Serena. And she walked away before either of them could say anything that neither of them was ready for. If you are watching this and you are feeling what I think you are feeling right now, I need you to like this video immediately and leave a comment below because I want to know, are you Team Kane already or do you need more convincing? Subscribe if you are not here yet because we are just getting started and I promise you this story has somewhere to go. Now stay with me. The problem, Serena thought, lying awake that night in her apartment with the city doing its usual indifferent glowing outside her window, was not that he was dangerous. She had known dangerous men. Her ex-fiancé, Marcus, had not been dangerous in any physical sense. But he had been the kind of dangerous that leaves you standing in your own life wondering which parts of it were real and which parts you had assembled from hope and wishful thinking and the way a person looked at you when they wanted something from you. She had rebuilt herself carefully after Marcus. She had taken her time. She had made decisions with her head and not with the particular traitor organ currently making itself known in the region of her sternum every time she thought about a man standing at a bar with a jaw like a verdict and eyes that tracked her through a room like she was the only fixed point in it. The problem was not the danger. The problem was that he had not even flinched when he put his body between her and a gunshot. He had not thought about it. He had not done a cost-benefit analysis or weighted the variables or decided she was worth it. He had simply moved, the way your hand moves to catch something falling before your mind has finished processing that it is falling, pure reflex, pure instinct, and that said something about him that no boardroom reputation or whispered warning could say. She had been careful for 3 years, and it had kept her safe and intact and functional and deeply, privately, tired of her own caution. She turned over and went to sleep and decided in the morning that she would not think about Kane Ryu anymore. She thought about him 7 times before noon. By noon the next day, a delivery arrived at the Harper Foundation offices addressed to her. Inside a matte black box was a single note, handwritten on thick paper in precise, unhurried script. It said, "The event was excellent. The spring exhibition needs a coordinator. I would like it to be you if you're interested." Below it was a number and a name. Kane Ryu. And below that, in smaller letters that she had to tilt the page to read, also, "I am sorry for what I said last night. You were right. I was angry. I did not want to be. That part is mine to manage." Serena read it twice. Set it down. Read it a 3rd time. It was the last sentence that broke something small and carefully maintained open in her chest. Not the business offer. Not the acknowledgement. Just that one sentence. That part is mine to manage. Like a man who had already had the conversation with himself and was not asking her to carry any piece of it. She called Diane. "I need you to talk me out of something," Serena said. "Who is he?" said Diane, who had known Serena for 11 years and did not waste time. "Kane Ryu." The silence on the other end lasted long enough that Serena counted it. For seconds. 5. "Serena," Diane said carefully. "I know. Kane Ryu, as in. I know. The man whose name people whisper like it's a weather warning. Diane. I want to make sure we are talking about the same person because." "He caught me," Serena said, and her voice came out quieter than she intended. "When there was a shooting outside the gala last week. He put himself between me and it. He didn't know me. He just did it." Diane was quiet for a moment. "What do you want me to say?" "Talk me out of it." "Okay," Diane said. "He is almost certainly involved in things that would make your hair stand up. He probably has enemies. Whatever happened outside that gala last week was probably about him. Getting close to him means getting close to all of that." "I know," Serena said. "And," Diane added, more gently now, "you have spent 3 years building a version of yourself that doesn't depend on anyone. I watched you do it. It was not easy. I do not think you should hand that to someone who could take it apart without meaning to." "I know," Serena said again. "So," Diane said. "So, are you going to call him?" Serena looked at the note on her desk. At the last line specifically. "I'm going to take the job," she said. Diane made a sound that was equal parts resigned and delighted. "Lord help you both." The spring exhibition was a 3-month project, and it was, objectively, a good professional decision. The Ryu Group's Cultural Foundation funded more than a dozen public arts initiatives across Seoul, and the spring exhibition was their flagship event. It was the kind of commission that added genuine weight to a coordinator's portfolio. Serena told herself this every morning as she prepared for the project meetings, and she believed it, and it was also not the entire truth, and she had decided she could live with that distinction. She saw Kane 4 times in the first 3 weeks. Twice in meetings where he was one of several stakeholders, professional and efficient, treating her with the same brisk respect he gave everyone in the room and nothing more. Once in a corridor where they were both walking somewhere and fell briefly into step and spoke about logistics for approximately 90 seconds, and she was very normal about all of it. Once, unexpectedly, in the building's ground floor coffee station at 7:45 in the morning, when neither of them had quite assembled their professional armor yet, and they stood 2 feet apart waiting for the machine and said almost nothing. And the silence was the most charged 90 seconds of Serena's recent memory. He noticed things about her. She caught him at it, not staring, nothing as obvious as that, but she was good at reading rooms and she was good at reading him, slowly, and what she saw was a man paying very close attention while working very hard to look like he was not. He noticed when she was tired. He noticed when something in a meeting frustrated her, and she chose to absorb it rather than address it. He noticed, one afternoon when she came into a planning session with a slight tension around her eyes that she thought she was hiding well, and said nothing about it for the entire meeting but afterward, in the corridor, said quietly, "Whatever it is, it's handled," and walked away, and she had found out 2 days later that the vendor who had been giving her scheduling trouble had suddenly become significantly more cooperative. She should have told him she did not need that. She let it go instead, because the honest answer was that it had not made her feel managed. It had made her feel like someone was watching out for her without requiring anything back, and she had forgotten what that felt like, and she had not realized she had missed it until it sat in front of her undeniable. But she was not in this. She was not. She was keeping the door closed, and she was doing her job well, and Kane Ryu was a client, and that was the shape of this. Then Milo Voss arrived. Milo Voss was a European art dealer who had partnered with the foundation on exhibition acquisitions, tall and charming and aware of both those things with the comfortable confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone he was interested in. He arrived at the foundation offices on a Tuesday, shook everyone's hand, and found Serena within 30 minutes with the specific targeting of someone who had either been told about her or noticed her immediately and moved on instinct. He was, objectively, not a bad man. He was funny in a loose, easy way that Serena found genuinely amusing. He was respectful. When she said she was busy, he said of course and found a different time. When she said she preferred to keep things professional, he said naturally and then found perfectly professional reasons to be near her with unreasonable frequency. Diane found the whole thing very entertaining. He is persistent, Diane said, eating Serena's lunch in Serena's office with zero remorse. I respect the commitment. He is a professional contact, Serena said. He brought you coffee this morning. It was for the whole team. He watched to make sure you specifically took a cup. Serena said nothing. Has Kane noticed? Diane asked with the studied innocence of someone who already knew the answer. Kane had noticed. Serena had not needed to see it directly. She had felt it. The particular quality of stillness that came over him in meetings when Milo was present. The way his responses became slightly more precise, clipped at the edges. The way, during one site walkthrough, Milo had touched Serena's arm briefly to direct her attention to something in the exhibition layout, and Kane, from across the room, had gone so still he had almost stopped being a person and become a very dangerous piece of architecture instead. After the walkthrough, when Milo had stepped away to take a call, Kane appeared beside her with the coffee she had left sitting on a table 15 minutes ago. You forgot this, he said. Thank you. She took it. Let the moment sit. Kane. Milo Voss is a professional contact. A pause. I know that. Do you? He looked at her then. Not the diagnostic scan. Not the careful professional glance. Just fully, directly, making no attempt to be something other than what he was in that moment, which was a man standing next to a woman who made him forget the architecture of his own control. It is not my business, he said, quietly and with the quality of something that cost him to say it. No, Serena agreed. It isn't. He nodded once. Looked at the exhibition space in front of them. He's not wrong to try, he said. For what it's worth. And Serena, who had been prepared for avoidance or coldness, or the kind of possessive overreach she had already half composed a speech about, was not prepared for that. For the honesty of it. For the way he turned his own wanting into something graceful instead of something demanding. She looked at his profile. At the line of his jaw and the careful stillness of him. "Kane," she said. "Don't," he said. Low. Almost a warning. Not to her, to himself. She looked away. They stood in silence for a moment that had no clean edges, no tidy resolution, just the two of them and everything neither of them had said yet, and the vast, patient difficulty of doing the right thing. "I need more time," she said finally. She did not explain more time for what. She did not need to. He turned his head and looked at her with an expression she would think about for a long time after. Something that was not quite relief and not quite pain. Something in between that lived in the territory of a man who had not expected to be hurt at all and was still adjusting to it. "Take what you need," he said. She went home that night and sat in her kitchen with a cup of tea going cold in front of her and thought about Marcus. Not with the familiar low-grade ache she had gotten used to, but with the precision of someone finally finishing the examination of a wound. Marcus Webb had been the kind of man who made you feel chosen. That was his specific gift. He had the ability to direct his attention at you in a way that made you feel like the only person in a room full of interesting people, and when Marcus Webb made you feel chosen, you believed it completely because he believed it too, in the moment. The problem with Marcus was not that he had been dishonest. The problem was that his feelings were entirely genuine right up until they weren't, and he had no framework for the difference between wanting someone and loving them. And by the time Serena understood the distinction, he had already introduced her to his family as the woman he was going to marry. She had planned a life with him. Not extravagantly, Serena had never been a person who needed extravagance, but concretely. She had imagined mornings and arguments and the specific domestic texture of a shared life. She had let herself want it. That was the part that had cost the most afterward. Not the humiliation of finding out at a charity dinner through someone else's careless mention that Marcus had quietly gotten engaged to a woman from his business circle while Serena was still wearing the ring he had given her. It was the wanting. She had let herself want something completely, and it had been taken away without warning, and the person who had taken it had never once seemed to understand what he had removed. She had given his ring back by courier the next morning. She had not cried in front of anyone. She had gone to her apartment, and she had sat on her bathroom floor for about 45 minutes and allowed herself exactly that much falling apart, and then she had gotten up and made a decision about the kind of person she was going to be going forward. The kind who did not let herself want things completely again. Not for a while. Not until she was sure. 3 years, it had turned out. 3 years of careful and competent and fine. She looked at the tea going cold in front of her and thought about Kane standing at that bar, managing his own jealousy quietly because he had decided it was his thing to manage. She thought about his handwriting. That part is mine to manage. She thought about him in the stairwell, shaking. She thought about the coffee note, precise and unhurried, and the key in her hand, warm from his pocket. Nothing, she thought. There was nothing wrong with me then. Marcus was just not big enough to hold what I actually am. And maybe, she thought, sitting in her kitchen in the Seoul dark with the city doing its luminous indifferent thing outside, maybe the point of 3 years of careful was not to protect herself forever. Maybe it was to rebuild herself so completely that the next time she opened the door, she would know exactly what she was giving and what she was worth receiving in return. She thought about Kane. She thought maybe it was time to at least open the window. The danger, when it came, did not announce itself. There had been a week of small wrongnesses, a feeling in the project office that something was watching, a report from one of the Foundation's security contacts about increased activity from the Volkov network, a rival international crime syndicate that had been making noise about the Ryu Group's territory for months. Kane had mentioned it once, briefly, in a way that said he was monitoring it and it was handled and she should not worry. Serena had said she was not worried, which was true, and also she had looked up the Volkov network at midnight on her phone and stared at what she found for a long time, which was also true. She was working late in the exhibition venue on a Thursday. The team had gone home, and she had stayed to finalize the floor layout, the way she often did, because she liked the particular productive quiet of an empty space with a purpose. when she heard the door at the far end of the hall. She thought it was security doing rounds. The footstep was wrong. She knew it the way you know something before your brain finishes building the case. Too deliberate. Not the loose rhythm of someone walking a familiar route. The rhythm of someone who had a destination and was moving toward it carefully. Serena put her tablet down quietly. She moved toward the staff exit at the side of the room. She was 12 feet from it when the lights went out. The darkness was total. No city light reached the center of the exhibition space. She went still and breathed and thought. Her phone was in her bag near the display table, the wrong direction. The exit was still ahead of her. 12 feet. She could do 12 feet in the dark. She made it 6. A hand closed around her arm. She did not scream. 3 years of being careful had included, among other things, a self-defense class she had taken after Marcus, because she had promised herself she would never be someone who froze. She dropped her weight, twisted, used the momentum of his grip against itself, and the hand released. She ran. She hit the exit bar with both hands and was through the door and into the stairwell and already pulling her phone from her dress pocket. She had put it there. She had done that on instinct when she heard the wrong footstep. She had been paying attention. And she was calling Kane before she had consciously made the decision to, because his number was the one her fingers found. He answered on the first ring. Serena. Someone is in the venue, she said. Her voice was steady. She was on the stairs moving down. I'm in the east stairwell. I got out, but... Keep moving, he said, and his voice was a different thing now. Still low. Still controlled. But stripped of everything except focus. What floor? 3rd going to 2nd. My team is 4 minutes out. Ground level east side. Do not stop moving. A pause. Are you hurt? No. Keep talking to me. She talked to him. She told him where she was on the stairs. She told him when she hit the 2nd floor landing. She told him when she heard something on the stairs above her. Faster now, the pretense of patience gone. She said his name once when the footsteps got close and his voice came back immediately, hard and certain. Ground floor. 30 more seconds. They're at the door right now. The ground floor exit burst open and 2 men in dark gear who were very clearly not about to hurt her came through it, and behind them, moving like a man who had been running, was Kane. He crossed the space between them in seconds. His hands came to her face first, both of them, framing her jaw, tilting her face up, checking her with an urgency that had nothing professional in it, nothing managed, just raw and unmediated and entirely himself. Are you hurt? He said again, and his voice was different from the phone. Rougher. They ate at a small place near the Hanamdong neighborhood that he had chosen specifically because it was not the kind of place anyone who knew Kane Ryu would think to look for him. No marble, no performance. Just good food and a corner table and morning light coming through a window at a useful angle. He arrived before her, which she noticed and filed, a man who was always precisely on time to everything, arriving early for this, standing up when she came in, which she also noticed and filed. Because the whole of Kane Ryu was a thing she was assembling piece by piece and she was paying attention. He had a coffee waiting for her, the right kind, which told her he had remembered something she had said once in passing on an entirely unremarkable afternoon when they had been talking about something else entirely, and she had mentioned, half to herself, that the coffee at the Foundation offices was made wrong, and she had stopped bothering to have any. He had remembered that. He had stored it and acted on it without making anything of it, and she sat down across from him and looked at the coffee and looked at him and thought that this was how you learned a person, not from the grand moments, but from the small ones. From what they carried forward without being asked. Thank you, she said. You said the Foundation makes it wrong, he said. I did. You remembered. He said nothing. He did not need to. She looked at him properly in the daylight for what felt like the first time, properly, without the professional buffer, or the event context, or the management of a room between them. He looked, in the ordinary morning light of a small restaurant that did not know his name, like a person rather than a presence. Not less than what he was everywhere else. Just more of something else. Tiredness at the edges of him, the kind you only see close up, the kind that comes from carrying things. And underneath it, attention. Complete and specific, aimed at her, patient. "I need to tell you some things," he said. "I know," she said. He told her about the Volkov network, about the history of it, the current pressure on the Ryu Group's territory, the reason someone had been in the exhibition venue the night before. He told her clearly and without softening it, and she listened the same way, without flinching and without pretending it was not serious. He told her about his father, about what he had inherited, about the difference between what he had chosen and what had already been chosen for him by the time he was old enough to understand the weight of the name. He did not ask her to forgive it or excuse it. He just told her the truth and let her hold it. When he finished, the coffee was half gone and the morning light had shifted. "I'm not going to pretend this is a simple thing," Serena said. "What you carry. What your world looks like. I know. And I'm not going to pretend I wasn't scared last night. I wasn't scared of you. I was scared because I don't want to go back to being careful about everything all the time. I've been doing that for 3 years and it's exhausting, and the reason I'm exhausted is because I've been doing it alone." She paused. "I'm not saying that's your responsibility. I want it to be," he said quietly. She looked at him. "That is what I am trying to tell you," he said. "I understand if the answer is no. I understand if what I am and what I come with is more than you are willing to take on. I will not ask you to be someone who simply accepts danger because she accepted me. You get to have opinions about this. You get to tell me when it's too much." He paused. "I have never said that to anyone before. I want you to know that." Serena was quiet for a moment. She thought about Marcus, who had never once asked what she needed. She thought about the version of herself she had been building for 3 years, careful and self-contained and safe. She thought about a man shaking in a stairwell because something had almost happened to her. "I need you to be honest," she said. "About everything. I don't need it to be simple. I need it to be true." "Yes," he said, without hesitation. "Always. Then we can figure out the rest," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, and the thing that happened to his face was not the ghost of a smile she had catalogued before. It was the real thing. Wide and unguarded and a little undone, like it had surprised him too, and she thought that this was possibly the most important thing she had seen from him yet, a man this contained, smiling like that, because of her. "There is one more thing," he said. The smile was still there, but his eyes had shifted. She waited. "Marcus Webb," he said. "He is Milo Vossa's silent business partner. He has a stake in 3 of the acquisitions the Foundation is considering for the exhibition." The name landed the way it always did when it came unexpectedly, like stepping on a stair that wasn't there. Serena was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "You knew," she said. "I found out last week. I wanted to tell you when the moment was right." "Is that why Milo?" "Yes." Webb sent Voss to scope the project. "He didn't know you would be coordinating. When Voss reported back that you were involved, Webb wanted Voss to stay close. Kane's jaw was doing that thing. He wanted to know if you were a problem." Serena set down her coffee cup carefully. She was doing that thing she did, absorbing, processing, not letting the emotion come until she had the full picture. But underneath the processing, something was moving. Something old and sharp and done. "He thought I would be a problem," she said. "He underestimated you," Kane said. "People who do not know you tend to do that." She looked at Kane. At the precise controlled fury in him that he was holding at a careful remove, because this was her moment, and he was not going to make it his. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Serena thought about it. Not about Marcus, not about the humiliation of 3 years ago, but about who she was right now. About the woman who had gotten herself out of a dark exhibition hall before the cavalry arrived. About 3 years of work and rebuilding and knowing her own value so thoroughly that she had stopped needing anyone to confirm it. "Nothing from you," she said. "This one's mine." He nodded. She could see that he wanted to offer more and was choosing not to, and she loved him a little for it. The verb surprised her. She filed it. "But," she added, "you can watch." The look on his face was worth every single thing. "If you have made it this far and you have not dropped a comment yet, I want to hear from you. Tell me, did you see the Marcus twist coming? Because I need to know. Like this video if this story is living in your chest right now. Subscribe because we are not done, and what is coming next is going to make you put your phone down and then immediately pick it back up. What followed was not a confrontation in the dramatic sense. It was more surgical than that. Serena had spent 3 years building professional credibility, and it turned out that was also the building of a weapon, one she had not specifically constructed for this purpose, but one that fit her hand perfectly when the time came. She requested a full audit of the exhibition acquisitions. Calmly, professionally, with the specific documentation that her position afforded her. The audit revealed that 2 of the 3 pieces tied to Webb's silent stake had significant provenance irregularities. The kind of irregularities that, once flagged, could not be unflagged. Marcus Webb received a formal notice from the Harper Foundation's legal counsel that his business relationship with the exhibition was being terminated. She heard he was furious. She heard it secondhand, through Diane, who had heard it through 3 other people, the way bad news travels when someone important loses something they thought was secured. She did not call him. She did not need to. The work spoke. Milo Voss, to his credit, was professional about the whole thing. He came to her office, sat down, and said, "I think I owe you an apology. I was not told everything about the situation I walked into." He paused. "I was also genuinely interested. For what it's worth. I want you to know those were 2 separate things." "I know," Serena said. "And I appreciate you saying so." He left graciously, and that was the end of that. Kane said nothing about the audit. He did not need to. He watched it happen from a careful, respectful distance, and the only thing he did was, 3 days after the Foundation sent its notice to Webb, leave a single message on her phone. Well handled. That is all. Nothing else. She saved it. She was not going to tell him that. But she saved it. The exhibition preparation continued. The weeks had a rhythm to them now, a new shape, and the shape included Kane in ways that felt less like negotiation and more like gravity, things that simply arranged themselves because they were supposed to. He had dinner with her on Tuesday nights, at the small place in Hanam-dong or at her apartment or occasionally at places he chose that turned out to reveal interesting things about him. Once a very loud market stall where he ate street tteokbokki in his good suit without a trace of self-consciousness, which made Serena laugh so hard she had to sit down. He laughed too, which she had not seen before, and it was a completely different thing from the smile. It loosened something in his whole face. Made him look his age, which was 34, instead of whatever ageless authority he projected by default. "You are actually funny," she told him, surprised. "I am not," he said. "You just made a very dry observation about that street vendor's upselling technique that nearly made me choke." That was just accurate. Accurate can also be funny. He looked at her with that expression she was cataloging, the one that said she had done something he was not expecting, and he was not quite sure yet whether to file it under delightful or dangerous. "You are the only person who argues with me," he said. "I'm not arguing. You are. I'm having a conversation. You are not used to those. I have conversations. You have exchanges," Serena said. "People give you information. You make decisions. That is not a conversation." He was quiet for a moment. "Then, is that what I do?" "With most people, yes. And with you." She looked at him over the remains of their street food. "With me you have conversations. Whether you like it or not." He looked at her for a long moment. Something shifted in him, not toward her, not yet, just a slight unlocking, like a man who had been standing at a door for a long time and was beginning to consider that going through it might not destroy him. "I like it," he said quietly. "For what it's worth." She looked away first. Her heart was doing the thing it did around him, the thing she had entirely given up pretending it did not do. "Good," she said. The danger, because it had not been resolved so much as temporarily redistributed, came back. Not as a stranger in a dark venue this time, but in the specific, cold, strategic form of Nadia Volkov. Nadia was the daughter of the Volkov Network's founding family, and she was not what people expected when they expected dangerous. She was 30, polished, and moved through Seoul's social world with the ease of someone who had studied it carefully from the outside and was now operating from within it. She appeared at a Foundation board dinner 2 weeks before the exhibition opening, introduced as an arts patron, which she technically was, and also was not the meaningful thing about her presence. She found Serena at the drinks table. "You are coordinating the spring exhibition," Nadia said. Not a question. I am, Serena said. Nadia looked at her with the precise attention of someone doing assessment. Kane Ryu has interesting taste, she said. In associates. Serena met her eyes. She had been briefed, cautiously, by Kane's head of security, a methodical woman named Jean who had delivered the information with the dry neutrality of someone who had long since stopped being surprised by anything. Nadia Volkov was here deliberately. Her presence at this event was a message aimed at Kane, delivered through proximity to Serena. The exhibition is quite strong this year, Serena said pleasantly. I hope you'll attend. Nadia smiled. It was a practiced smile with very little warmth behind it. I intend to. Tell me, how much does Kane tell you about his work? As much as is relevant. And you are comfortable with what you know? Serena set down her glass. Ms. Volkov, she said, and she was aware that using the name would confirm she knew exactly who she was talking to, and she used it deliberately to let Nadia know she was not unaware. I am going to save us both some time. I know why you are here. I understand the message. Kane will have received it before we finish this drink. She picked her glass back up. But if you thought I would be frightened or unstable or persuadable, I want to help correct that impression. Nadia looked at her for a long moment. Something moved in her expression, something that might have been, in a different context, respect. He picked well, Nadia said finally. He did, Serena agreed pleasantly. She walked away and texted Kane. Nadia Volkov just introduced herself. Relayed your terms back to her. Stood my ground. You might want to handle the rest. His response came in 40 seconds. I know. Jean told me. Are you all right? Serena, I'm fine. Also, I think she respected it. Kane, she should. Then, after a pause, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Then, 10 seconds after that, don't let anyone stand too close to you until I get there. Serena stared at that last message for a moment, then typed back, Kane. Then, because she could not help herself, I am standing in a ballroom full of foundation donors. I think I am adequately surrounded. His response, that is not what I meant and you know it. She put her phone in her pocket, pressed her lips together against a smile she was not ready to give the room, and went back to work. She circulated. She checked in with the catering team. She confirmed the evening's closing remarks timeline with the foundation director and redirected a conversation about the auction lots that was heading somewhere unproductive and answered 3 questions from board members who could have found the answers themselves with minimal effort but preferred asking her, which she had made her peace with years ago. She felt the moment Kane walked in before she saw him. The room did its rearrangement. Conversations shifted. Eyes moved toward the entrance with the specific involuntary attention that power commanded in a room full of people who respected it. She looked up. He found her immediately. Not the way people usually found someone in a crowded room, scanning, searching, settling. He walked in and his eyes went directly to where she was standing with the accuracy of a man who had been tracking her location for the 20 minutes he was in transit and simply confirmed what he already knew. She watched him register that she was fine. She watched his shoulders come down a fraction. She watched the fine edge of what had driven him across the city in 17 minutes smooth out and settle. He was going to be absolutely insufferable about this, she could already tell. He was going to install new security protocols for foundation events, and she was going to have opinions about that, and they were going to have their first real argument probably by Thursday, and she found, standing in the warm light of the board dinner, that she was not remotely unhappy about any of it. He crossed the room toward her. Kane arrived in 17 minutes. He had, she learned later, been at a meeting across the city that he had walked out of, which was apparently something he had not done in 8 years of running the Ryu Group. His head of security told this to Diane, who told it to Serena in the same tone she used when something was both concerning and enormously satisfying. He walked into the board dinner and the room did its usual rearrangement. He found Serena first, the way he always found her first, and whatever he saw in her face seemed to satisfy him that she was whole and intact and fine, because his shoulders came down a fraction and the line of his jaw softened. Then he found Nadia Volkov, and it was a different quality of stillness entirely. They spoke in a corner for 11 minutes. Serena could not hear it. She did not need to. She watched Nadia's face move through several careful recalibrations and watched Kane stand without moving an inch and knew that whatever was being communicated, it was being received clearly. Nadia Volkov left the dinner early. Her car departed. The room returned to its normal temperature. Kane came to find Serena after. "Is it handled?" she asked. "For now," he said. She was testing the edges. She found them. "What did you say to her?" He was quiet for a moment. "I told her that any further interference with anything connected to me, including the foundation and everyone associated with it, would be treated as a direct escalation." He paused. "I also told her that the woman she spoke to earlier this evening is not a pressure point. She is the reason there is no room left to negotiate." Serena looked at him. The warmth of it moved through her slowly. "You told her I'm not a weakness," she said. "I told her you are the reason I have no patience left for politics," he said. "Which is true and more dangerous to her than any threat." She looked at him for a long moment. At this man who had been raised inside something complicated and heavy and dark, and had carried it without ever letting it become an excuse. At the person she had been watching piece by piece for months, the one who stood at bars and managed his own jealousy, who apologized in handwriting, who shook in stairwells, who stood outside her door in the dark and told her to take the time she needed. "Kane," she said. I need to tell you something." He went still the way he went still when things mattered. Completely. Like the rest of the world had been put on pause. "I have been scared," she said. "Not of you. Of this. Of letting something be real enough to hurt if it goes wrong. I built a version of myself after my last relationship that was very good at being fine, and I have been in it so long I started to think it was the whole of me." She paused. "It is not. And I am telling you that because you deserve to know what you are actually getting, not the version that is fine with everything, but the one who gets scared and needs honesty and will absolutely argue with you for the rest of your natural life." He looked at her with full eyes. Not glazed or distant. Present. Completely and irreversibly present. "I know who I am getting," he said. "I have been paying attention." "I know you have." "Serena." His voice was low and certain and done with careful distance. "I have been in love with you since the night you told me I was bleeding instead of screaming for help." She exhaled. "That is early," she said. "I know. That is possibly the second sentence we ever exchanged." "I know that too." She laughed. It came out of her with a warmth she had not let herself feel freely in years, and he watched it happen with an expression like a man receiving something he had not been sure the world would give him. She stepped toward him. He met her halfway, because that was always how it was with them, both of them moving at once, neither of them waiting for the other to go first. And when the evening settled and the dinner wound down and the city outside was doing its ordinary luminous thing, they left together, and the night was still, and the danger was managed, and Serena Calloway walked beside Kane Ryu through the Seoul streets and felt, for the first time in 3 long years, exactly the right size. Subscribe right now if you are feeling this, because the home stretch of this story is going to break you open in the best possible way. Like this video. Leave a comment. Tell me your favorite moments so far. I read every single one. Do not go anywhere. The exhibition opened on a Friday evening in late April, and it was, by every observable measure, exactly what Serena had built it to be. Clean and beautiful and considered, every piece in conversation with the next, the lighting doing exactly what she had spent 3 weeks calibrating it to do. She stood near the entrance in a burgundy dress that Diane had selected with the energy of someone who had been waiting for exactly this occasion and absolutely no patience for Serena's suggestion that the navy one was also fine, and watched people move through the space she had created and felt the specific satisfaction of work done at the level you actually imagined it. This was the part of her job she loved the most and was worst at explaining, the way a space could be arranged so that people moved through it a certain way without knowing they were being directed. The way light could make a piece feel intimate or monumental depending on its angle. The way negative space was not emptiness, but breath, the room's equivalent of a pause in a sentence, giving the eye somewhere to rest before the next thing asked something of it. She had learned this not from a textbook, but from years of standing in rooms other people had built and noticing what worked and what didn't and asking herself why until she could answer it. She had built this room to feel like a conversation. She thought she had succeeded. Kane arrived with his senior team at 7:15. He was the last to enter the main hall, and when he did, he stopped inside the entrance and looked at what she had made really looked, the way he looked at things that mattered, with his full attention and no performance of looking, and then he looked at her. And the expression on his face was the kind that required no translation. He crossed the room, stood beside her, did not say anything for a moment, just looked at the space she had built. "It is extraordinary," he said. "Thank you," she said. "I mean that. I know you do." She watched a couple stop in front of one of the central pieces, a large canvas that had been giving her trouble with its positioning for 2 weeks until she had moved it 3 inches to the left on a Tuesday afternoon and everything had resolved. She watched them look at it. She watched something happen in the woman's face, a quiet opening, the particular expression of encountering something that says something you had been trying to say yourself. That was why she did this work. "It was a good project," she said quietly. "It was a good outcome," he said, and she heard the weight of everything that word was carrying. She looked up at him. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a small envelope. Not decorated. Not performed. Just a plain envelope with her name on it in his handwriting, which she recognized now. She would know it anywhere, and which still did something to her every time she saw it. There was something about the precision of it, the way each letter was deliberate without being stiff, that told her things about him he had not said in words. That he was careful with things that mattered to him. That she had become one of those things. She opened it. Inside was a key. And a note. The note said, "This is the key to the apartment on the 4th floor of my building. I had it furnished for you because you mentioned once that you liked the light at that angle in the afternoon. You are not obligated to use it. I just wanted you to have the option of somewhere that was yours and also close to me. You told me you needed honesty. Here is mine. I want you close." That is the honest and possibly unreasonable truth of it. She read it twice. The key was warm from being in his pocket. She closed her fingers around it. "Kane," she said. "You don't have to decide now," he said quickly. "Or at all. I want to see it," she said. He went still. "Now, after the exhibition," she said. "We can go together." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did the thing she had been cataloging since the first week, the smile that was not the ghost of one, but the real thing, wide and unguarded and still slightly surprised at itself. "After the exhibition," he said. She looked back at the room she had built, full of people and light and art, and felt the warmth of something that had no tidy name yet, but was real and growing and entirely hers. Diane came for dinner on a Sunday and spent the evening conducting what she called a casual visit and what was transparently a comprehensive assessment of Kane Ryu as a human being. She arrived skeptical, which was her right, and which Serena respected because Diane had also been there 3 years ago when Serena had sat on her bathroom floor for 45 minutes and then gotten up and reorganized her entire life. Diane had been there for the getting up part, and she had earned the right to be thorough. She arrived with wine and the energy of a woman who had prepared questions. Kane, to his credit, did not perform. That was the thing about him that Diane would mention later. He was the same in the kitchen making tea as he was in whatever room people feared him in, and that consistency read as either confidence or honesty or both, and Diane, who was a very good reader of people, noted it and filed it. She asked him about growing up between the States and Seoul. He answered honestly, including the parts that were complicated. She asked him what he thought Serena was like. He considered it genuinely, the way he considered everything, and said that she was the most clear-eyed person he had ever met, and that he found it alternately clarifying and humbling. And Diane had glanced at Serena at that point with an expression that said this specific answer had moved the needle significantly. She asked him, toward the end of the evening, when Serena was in the kitchen pretending not to eavesdrop and almost certainly hearing everything, "What do you want for her?" A pause. Then Kane said, "For her to want things again." She stopped for a while. She had a reason, and it was a good reason, but she is too much of a person to stay in that. Another pause. "I want to be the reason she stopped being careful with herself." The kitchen was very quiet. Diane arrived in the kitchen 30 seconds later, poured herself more wine, and said under her breath to Serena, "I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I will say that man just described you more accurately than most people who have known you for years." Serena looked at the counter. "I know," she said. "You already love him." Diane. "You do." "I am," Serena said carefully, in the process of acknowledging that, yes. Diane refilled Serena's glass. "Well," she said. "Okay then." She left at 10 with the satisfied air of someone who had completed their due diligence and arrived at a favorable conclusion, and Kane cleaned up the kitchen without being asked, which Serena noticed, and she filed it in the same place she filed everything about him. The growing permanent record of a man. She was learning the way you learn someone when you decide they are worth the full attention. The months that followed had a different quality to them. Not simple. Nothing about the world Kane inhabited was simple, and Serena was not interested in a version of this that pretended otherwise. There were evenings when his phone rang at 11, and the whole atmosphere of him shifted in a way she recognized now and had learned to sit with without making it mean something about her. There were conversations she was not part of and decisions he carried alone, and the particular weight of a man who ran something large and morally complex and had never had someone in his life who was both inside the radius and genuinely unafraid. She moved into the fourth-floor apartment. Not immediately. She took 3 weeks, went back to see it twice, asked him 3 direct questions about his intentions and received 3 direct answers. On the 3rd visit, she stood at the window and looked at the afternoon light coming in at the exact angle he had described, and she stood there long enough that he came to stand beside her without touching her, just beside her, and said nothing because there was nothing necessary to say, and she decided. She moved in on a Saturday with 2 suitcases and a box of kitchen things she was not going to surrender to storage, and Diane supervising from the entrance with the energy of a project manager. Kane's team had offered to handle the whole thing, and she had said no, thank you, and done it herself with Diane, and felt that this specific distinction mattered. He was not there when she arrived. He had been deliberately somewhere else to give her the space of making it hers before it was also his. She had found that out from Jean later, and she had stood in the kitchen of the new apartment and felt something loosen in her chest about it, the consideration of it, the specific attentiveness of a man who understood that arrival needs room. He brought her coffee wrong for the first 4 mornings because he had been guessing at how she took it instead of asking. On the 5th morning, she watched him guess again and said, "Kane, just ask me." He set the cup down, looked at her. "How do you take your coffee?" She told him. He made it. He brought it to her and watched her take the first sip with the focused attention of a man who is storing the information somewhere permanent. "You could have asked me months ago," she said. "I know," he said. "Why didn't you?" He considered it. "I was afraid of what it would mean to ask," he said. "To know exactly how you take your coffee means you are real and present in my life in a way that I can lose. I was managing the risk." Serena looked at him over her cup. "That," she said gently, "is the saddest thing you have ever said to me." He looked at her for a moment. Then, quietly, "I know." She put her hand over his. He turned his over and held it, and they sat in the morning quiet of the apartment she had moved into, with the light he had known she would like coming through at exactly the right angle. And she thought about 3 years of careful doors and the particular courage of opening one. The Volkov situation resolved itself over the following 2 months in the way that Kane had said it would, not with noise, but with pressure applied strategically, in the specific places that made continuing the conflict more expensive than stepping back. Nadia Volkov withdrew. The Ryu group's territory stabilized. Jean reported the decreased threat level to both of them with the same dry neutrality with which she reported everything, and Serena said thank you and meant it. And Kane looked at her with an expression that said he had never had someone to come home to after the resolution of a thing like this, and was still learning what to do with that. A Tuesday evening in the apartment, and she was cooking badly, because cooking was not her skill, and she was aware of this. And he was sitting at the counter watching her with the patient attention of a man who had decided a long time ago that whatever she was doing was interesting just by virtue of her doing it, and she burned the bottom of the rice, which she felt he should have warned her about. "You knew," she said. "I did not want to interrupt your process," he said. "My process was burning dinner." "It was your process." She looked at him. He looked entirely too untroubled about this. She pointed the wooden spoon at him. "You're enjoying this." "I am enjoying being here," he said simply. Like that was the whole of it. She set the spoon down, looked at him across the small island counter, this man in his shirt sleeves in her kitchen, entirely relaxed in a way she knew he was not relaxed most places, watching her burn rice and finding it the best part of his day. "Kane," she said. I love you." The kitchen went very quiet. He looked at her for a long moment. Not with surprise, exactly, she thought he had known, the way she had known about herself a month ago, and simply waited for the right moment to say it. But something in his face moved anyway, something deep and unmistakable. He stood up from the counter, came around it, stopped in front of her, reached up and tucked a curl back from her face with a gentleness that was entirely at odds with everything the world thought it knew about him. "I know," he said. "I have known for a while." "That is not how you respond to 'I love you,'" she informed him. The smile again. The real one. "I love you," he said. "I have been in love with you since the rain. Since you told me I was bleeding. Since you went back inside a gala with my blood on your dress, and I spent the next 4 days trying to talk myself out of finding you." He paused. "I talked myself out of nothing." She laughed. He pulled her into him, and her arms went around him, and he held her the way he had held her in the stairwell, like something precious and found and his, except that this time there was no danger in the dark, no urgency. Just an ordinary Tuesday kitchen with burned rice, and the city outside doing its ordinary luminous thing, and two people who had chosen each other slowly and stubbornly and completely. He proposed on a Saturday morning in November, which was not what she expected, because she had been braced for the grand gesture. The man had the resources for a grand gesture that would make the city stare. And what she got instead was the small kitchen in her apartment, early light. Him sitting across from her with a cup of coffee and a ring box that he had placed on the table between them without ceremony, and was watching her with the particular expression that she now knew meant he was terrified and was choosing to do the terrifying thing anyway. "I was going to plan something significant," he said. Jean had suggestions. Diane had more suggestions. My head of acquisitions somehow got involved, and I stopped that immediately. A pause. "But then I thought about all the things that have mattered between us, and they have all been small. The note. The coffee. The stairwell. The key." He looked at her steadily. "I did not want to put this in a room that felt like a performance. I wanted to put it here, where you actually live. Where I get to be a person instead of a name." Serena looked at the ring box. Then at him. "You planned a speech," she said. "I did not." "Kane. That was a speech." "That was the truth," he said. "They are sometimes the same length." She opened the ring box. It was not ostentatious. It was a single stone, deep and clear, set simply, the kind that would sit on a hand and look like it had always been there. Like it had been chosen by someone who thought about what she would actually want to wear every day, not what would impress a room. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. He exhaled. Something in the whole of him softened and released all at once, and she saw it, and she loved him for it, for the man underneath the armor and the name, and the careful control, the one who still held his breath waiting to be said yes to. He came around the table, took the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger, and it fit, because of course it did, because he had paid attention in the specific, permanent way that was his nature. She held his face in her hands. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I was careful for 3 years," she said quietly. "I know. I stopped being careful because of you. I know that too. Don't make me regret it." "Never," he said. And the word had no performance in it, no grand declaration, just the simple, unshakable weight of a man who meant what he said, and had never once done otherwise. Diane, when she found out an hour later via a photo of the ring and a single message that said he did it in the kitchen, replied with 17 consecutive exclamation marks and then called and demanded the full account. And Serena sat on the apartment floor with her back against the couch and her ring on her finger and told the whole story and laughed at the part about the acquisition's head, and Diane laughed too, and for a while it was just the two of them, 11 years of friendship. On either end of a phone call in a Saturday morning. "Are you happy?" Diane asked, finally, when the laughing had settled. Serena looked around the apartment. At the afternoon light coming in at the angle she had loved from the first visit. At the slightly wrong coffee cup still on the counter from this morning, he had made it right now, always right now, but she had kept the wrong one because it was the morning he had asked. At the view of the city and the ordinary luminous permanence of it. Yes, she said. Simple and clean and true. I'm happy. Now here is where I need every single one of you to listen carefully because I want to tell you something before we get to the last part of this story. Everything Serena built in those 3 years of being careful, every decision she made for herself, every door she kept locked, every morning she chose her own peace over the risk of someone else, that was not wasted time. That was the making of her. The version of herself that could stand in a dark stairwell and not freeze. That could face Nadia Volkov in a ballroom and be unimpressed. That could open the ring box in the kitchen and say yes without flinching. You cannot love well from a broken place. You build yourself first. And then you choose. Subscribe if that hit you somewhere real. Like this video. And stay with me for the end. Outside, Seoul was doing what Seoul did, enormous and indifferent and luminous, and inside the small apartment with the good afternoon light and the permanently burned bottom pan and the key on the hook by the door. 2 people sat in the ordinary extraordinary morning and were entirely home. She was 3 months along when she told him, which was not planned but was not wrong either, and he was still for a long time after she said it, long enough that she started to form a question. And then he looked at her with an expression that had no catalog entry yet, something entirely new, something that lived in the territory past love and into the kind of territory that had no name except everything. Serena, he said, and her name in his voice was the way it had always been, like it was the most important word in the room. I know it soon, she said. No, he said. It is right. He reached across and took her hand. Turned it over. Pressed his lips to her palm the way he had that first night in the corridor, certain and deliberate and devastating. It is exactly right. He sat very still for another moment. She watched him process it, not with fear, not with resistance, but with the quality of a man who had spent years operating from a place of loss, of contingency, of a world that could be dismantled without warning, and was now sitting across from something that was permanent and chosen, and his in a way that nothing in his world had ever been. She saw the moment it landed. She saw it in his face, the full weight of it arriving and being received without armor. His eyes had a brightness that he made no attempt to manage. I don't know how to do this, he said quietly. Neither do I, she said. We'll figure it out. He looked at her. Are you scared? She thought about it honestly. Yes, she said. And I'm more okay with being scared than I have ever been, because I'm scared with someone this time. He brought her hand to his mouth and held it there. She felt his breathing against her knuckles, slow and deliberate, the same control she had watched him use in 100 high-stakes moments, now turned entirely toward holding himself together in the face of something good. Kane, she said gently. It's allowed to be a good thing. He looked up. It is the best thing, he said. And later, when Diane shrieked and Jean nodded with the composed satisfaction of someone who had predicted this and filed it accordingly, and Diane shrieked again. And when Kane called the small place in Hanamdong and reserved their corner table for that evening and ordered enough food for 4 people because he had been watching Serena eat for months and knew what she needed. And when the city outside was lit and moving and entirely indifferent to the fact that something irreversible and good had happened inside this particular life, Serena sat in the afternoon light of the apartment with the ring on her finger and her hand on her stomach and thought about the night she heard a gunshot and looked up and found a man she had not been looking for. She thought about 3 years of careful doors. She thought about what it cost to open them. She thought it was the best thing she had ever spent. They were married on a quiet Saturday in spring at a venue that was elegant but not enormous, the way Serena wanted it. 20 people who mattered rather than 200 who expected to be invited. Diane cried through the whole thing and refused to admit it. Jean stood at the back of the room with her hands clasped, and when Serena glanced at her during the vows, Jean gave her a single nod that contained approximately 11 words worth of genuine approval. Kane was already standing at the front when she came in, and when he saw her he went very still in the way she had come to know meant something had gotten past the wall entirely. She walked toward him, and he watched her the whole way, with the look she had first catalogued in a gala corridor. Not appreciative, not possessive. Just certain. Like a man who had found the fixed point in the room and had no intention of looking anywhere else. She stood beside him. He took her hand. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," he said back. And then, barely above a whisper, the corner of his mouth doing the thing, "You're late." "I'm exactly on time." "You're 30 seconds late." "Kane." "I counted." She laughed. He smiled, the real one, wide and unguarded and entirely his, and outside the small venue windows, Seoul was doing its ordinary enormous luminous thing, and inside, between two people who had chosen each other slowly and stubbornly and completely, something permanent was beginning. It had begun, if either of them were being precise about it, in the rain outside a gala. With a gunshot and a body between her and the dark. With a man who put himself in front of danger for a woman he did not know and then handed her clutch back without expecting anything. She had thought, standing in that rain, "He needs that looked at." She had thought, "I should go home." She had not gone home. And as the spring afternoon settled and the vows were spoken and the room was full of the specific warmth of people who loved the two people standing at its center, Serena Calloway, Serena Ryu, she thought, and the name settled in her like a key in a lock, looked at the man beside her and thought that this was exactly what it felt like when you stopped being careful for the right reason. Not because you had stopped being afraid, but because you had found something worth the risk of being afraid for. Now that, besties, is where I leave you. But I am going to need you to tell me in the comments, did you feel that ending? Because I felt it writing it and I want to know which part of Serena and Kane's story stayed with you the longest. The rain. The stairwell. The coffee. The ring box on the kitchen table on a Saturday morning. The way he counted how late she was at their own wedding, because of course he did. Drop it below. I read every single comment and I respond when I can. If this story moved you, share it today with someone who needs a reminder that the right love does not ask you to be smaller. It shows up for you in stairwells. It apologizes in handwriting. It asks how you take your coffee and stores the answer like it matters. Like this video if you are leaving with a full heart. Subscribe so you do not miss what we have coming next, and I promise you, what is coming is going to make you forget everything else you had planned for today. One love. I will see you in the next one. But before you go, there is something Kane's team found in the Volkov network files after Nadia stood down. A name. A connection that goes back further than the Ryu group. Further than Kane's father. Something that suggests the night of the gala, the gunshot, the man who crashed into Serena in the rain. None of it was random. Some stories do not end. They just find a new chapter. Stay close.